Well, welcome back to the Faith Together podcast, sponsored by the Center for Faith and Family at Olivet Nazarene University. I'm Lindsey, and I'm joined today with my co-host, Leon. Hi, Leon.
Hi, Lindsey.
It's great to be together today because we are starting a new series.
Yes, new series are always exciting for us. We kind of get pumped up for what we're going to speak about. And of course, we always have guests when we have a new series, so that's always fun too.
Yeah, it really is. We just finished up Shalom at Home. So if you weren't able to listen to any of those episodes, we encourage you to go back, listen in. It was a great series. But today we are starting a new one called Everyday Faith. And Leon, you and I, as children's pastors for many, many years, we appreciate this topic because we know that what happens at home is more important than what happens at church.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we're going to discover is they can be just everyday moments.
That's right.
They don't have to be special moments.
That's right.
Yeah.
And even though it's hard for us to admit that at home time is more than church time, we'd love to have the kids all the time at church.
Yeah.
But we know it's important and it's practical. And we want to help you as our listeners to be the best parents you can be in all the spaces that you're in. And so
absolutely,
this series, we're going to look at different types of days that families experience. So this first episode, we're going to focus in on just ordinary days, the regular routines, the getting up, the carpool, the going home, all the things. Then next week, we're going to focus on special days. So those are things like birthdays, graduations, milestone moments, maybe back to school, something that has transpired throughout the year that is a special day for your family. Then we're going to talk about holidays because those are important in the life of family. And then game days. Game days are something that a lot of families experience with youth sports and different things happening.
And do we have somebody special for that?
We do. We have a very special guest coming for the game day episode. That is Ben Zobrist. He is a MVP baseball player from the Chicago Cubs.
That's right. He won the MVP in the World Series the year the Chicago Cubs won. And Ben attended Olivet as a student.
Yes.
And so he's going to be here for a chapel service, and we have the privilege of having him on the podcast while he's here.
Yeah, and he has a great ministry for mental health in young people as they play sports.
Yeah, so looking forward to hearing from him. And then our final episode in this series is going to be summer days. So talking about that upcoming summer season. It is coming, right, Leon? We are going to have summer. It is.
Oh, my goodness.
It's hard to tell looking outside right now, but yes, it's coming.
So those summer days, what we can do to be intentional in the summertime. And we have a great friend, Dan Lavalia, that will be joining us for that conversation. He is a camp director up at Camp Paradise. And he's been a great friend of mine over the years, so I'm excited for that conversation. But for today's episode and next week's episode, we've got another great friend, new friend to us, Traci Smith, that's going to be joining us here in just a minute.
Yeah. And, as we give thought to these days that we're going to talk about and ways to celebrate and make them significant in the lives of our kids, especially as they're walking with Christ, one of the things that we started with, Lindsey, when we first began our project is we thought, how can we help parents without adding things to their busy schedule?
Right.
Parents already have so much going on with their kids and just family life in general. And we wanted to make sure that we weren't just saying, okay, here's a bunch of new things that you have to do as parents. And so we really have focused on how do we take the ordinary routines of life that are just a part of our regular day and be intentional about how we are living those. And so, as you're listening today to the things that we're going to be sharing, we want you to keep in mind that we're not trying to add new things. We're just trying to help you to be more intentional with the things that you're already doing. And a lot of that came out of our research when we were studying all of the areas that we felt like that this grant was leading us through. And one of the things that came to the forefront were what we consider our top 10 list that you and I have worked with a lot, Lindsey.
Yep.
And in this top 10 list, these are the practices that we feel like are the most important that parents participate in. And one of those is everyday life.
Yeah.
And so it fits in with the Shema that we've talked about from Deuteronomy 6, and it fits so much. So it's real great that we have now a podcast series where we're really focusing on these everyday moments.
Absolutely. And I know that This work that we continue to be a part of at the center is not something that we are alone in, which I'm so grateful for. There are plenty of experts and leaders in the field that we're learning from and growing with as we look at how to share faith in everyday moments. And so one of those wonderful experts we got to know at the Lily Gathering.
That's right.
This past year, we got to go to Traci's workshop. And so I'm just thrilled to welcome author and minister Traci Smith to Faith Together. Hi, Traci.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for being with us. We're thrilled to have you and would love for you just to share a little bit about yourself, your family, and your career with our listeners.
Sure. Well, let me start out by saying I feel like kindred spirits, like this conversation. If you could see me, I know it's just audio, but I was nodding along so strongly to everything you already said. As you said, I'm a pastor and I'm a mom of 3. I have a 14, a 13, and a 9-year-old. And my work is centered around helping families live into faith. And as you said, it's not about doing a lot of new things. It's about noticing those moments that are already there. So I lead a grant-funded initiative called Family Faith Every Day. And it's built around the years of work and research and books that I have written around this topic, which is to help parents and ministry leaders find those simple and meaningful ways to connect their faith with everyday life.
That is fantastic. And I don't know a better segue into our conversation today.
That's right. Yeah. So we're going to focus, Traci, on your book, Faithful Families, which is just, can I just tell you, it's just an incredible book. And you have such great insight in there. You know, I was thinking as I was even scanning through it again today, because this is like my second time going through it. And I was thinking, I would have liked to have written something like this, but I don't think I could have come up near with this many great ideas and insights that you had. And so let's start there. Can you share with us kind of what sparked this in you, that you have this desire to help families kind of take these ordinary moments of life and make them sacred?
Sure. Well, I would say it's 2 things, looking back and kind of looking forward. So growing up, my family was a family of educators and we went to church, and my parents really kind of brought those 2 things together. It was sort of a magical childhood in many ways, where lots of rituals and special moments were celebrated. And then when I had my first child, I was at home on maternity leave, and I was thinking, how do I want to raise this child in faith? And at the time I was a food blogger, which, hang with me here, guys. But I liked giving people simple recipes. So if you look through Faithful Families, knowing that history, you might be like, oh, this makes perfect sense. This is actually like a cookbook for faith. So all of those ideas are simple ideas to use at home. And it gets me choked up even to say it to you too. But when I wrote all of that down, my eldest was a baby. And so I was sort of writing out what I imagined my own family would do. And it turned out to be a gift, not only to my family, but to so many others. So it's really a book about integrating instead of adding. Like you said, we're helping parents and families practice faith in ways that are just sustainable, and they're embodied and they're life-giving. And for me, it was writing a roadmap for my own family. And I was just thrilled when it resonated with so many others over the years.
That's beautiful. I love the cookbook of faith.
Yeah, it's great. It's almost like an oversimplification in many ways. As parents, I think our tendency is to think we've got to do all these really deep spiritual things in order to help our kids grow in their relationship with God, and often miss, as we're talking about today, the ordinary moments. So I love that you capitalized on that and really focused on that.
Yeah, it makes me think of things that are sacred, but also simple. Both of those can be true at the same time. Mm-hmm. And many times we overcomplicate it, even in our own journey with the Lord. So I love that. Now, Traci, we don't have time to go through all the ideas in your book, But I'm wondering if you could share 2 or 3 ways of ordinary, like an ordinary everyday moment, and how it can be transformed into a sacred one.
Absolutely. And I think, that division, even saying like, okay, we have our spiritual life and then we have our other life. That's something that I'm trying to help families rethink a little bit, because all of it is our life. All of it is our life, right?
Yes.
God is with us all the time. So it's not a matter of maybe adding moments, is recognizing the God who is present among us in these moments. So I would offer 3 simple ways to think about that. The first is around the table. And I know that it's harder and harder and harder for us to even find times around the table as a family. But whenever we are around the table, it's a perfect time to open up a conversation around where God is in our lives, and to start with gratitude or prayer or noticing just a time around the table. In our family, gratitude is something that is emphasized absolutely every time we sit down as a family around the table. And then the second thing I would point out is the idea of ritual at bedtime. And the one that I would point to is the idea of blessing your children at bedtime. I feel like if you think about what we say to our kids on the daily, there's so much instruction. Do this, get this, put your shirt on, get your clothes, come over here, don't forget your backpack. And then to end the day with the opportunity to bless them. They don't have to do anything except just receive a blessing from you. I think that's a huge place to start. And you might even find that your children bless you back when you do that. So that's the second one that I would offer. And then the final one that I wanted to offer in Faithful Families, there's a whole chapter on rituals for difficult times. And I think that when it comes to talking to our kids about where God is in those difficult times, sometimes we get caught unaware. It just sneaks up on us. Something difficult happens. We know that it's going to, but when it does happen, we're just speechless. So I'd like to encourage everyone listening today to think about that. And the simple trick that I always teach parents is have a candle in a drawer you are prepared to pull out and light when something happens that you don't know how to explain to your kids. Maybe it's a news event, maybe somebody is sick and you don't exactly know how you're going to talk about it. Just light the candle, gather everyone, and give thanks to God for being with us, and ask for God's presence, ask Jesus to help, and then light the candle. So those are just 3 simple ways. I could go on all day if you want more, but
So I want to follow up on a couple of those, because that's really intriguing to me. I was going through your book at lunch today and paying attention more closely to the chapter 4 on difficult times. And I was shocked when I saw a focus on a family ceremony to mark a divorce. And I thought, what? You want to celebrate a divorce? And I realized that's not at all what it is. I love this idea of taking these difficult things that have happened in our lives as families and creating an environment where discussion can be done. It can be acknowledged that this is a hardship that we're going through, and that you give really practical tips on how to put together a ceremony or a way of remembrance for that event. And again, I was quite surprised. You've got a part in here on traumatic events that happen in your lives, a natural disaster, which of course we had here in the Bourbonnais, Kankakee area recently.
We did.
And then even things like marking the loss of a pregnancy. That's something that the family experiences together. And I think we tend to think, and Lindsey and I have seen this a lot as children's pastors, where families are going through hard times and we ask the parents how they're doing, and they talk about their struggles. Yeah. And then we ask, how are the kids doing? And usually the answer is, oh, they're doing okay. And almost like they don't have the same emotional response to these difficult times as the parents do. And I think this is just a recognition of honoring the kids and helping as a family to experience the hardship together. Do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. And like I said, that chapter is one that time and again, parents and ministry leaders have come back to. And actually, it's a huge part of what I'm living into right now as I think about what I want to write next, is actually expanding on that. Because like we were talking about, our lives, our whole lives belong to God. So these moments that are grittier and more challenging and tougher, we don't want to hide those from God. We want to teach our children that God is present. I mean, think of the Psalms and the psalmists crying out to God with these tough moments. And we had a really tough moment happen a couple months ago in that our dog died unexpectedly, tragically. And for a kid, I mean, gosh, I just am getting choked up even thinking about what that meant for them. And it was not the time for me to start inventing what am I going to do? I knew what to do because I've helped parents walk through it. I knew that we needed to let the children see the dog and pray about it and figure out how we were going to bury the dog and all of these moments. And so you're right. Some of these, I mean, divorce, I cried through writing that because I thought, Lord, help me if I were to ever need this practice, right? But we know that there are complex situations that come up, and I just didn't want to leave families hanging for that. As a pastor, my husband is also a pastor, and we see so many families that just they come to us with their most vulnerable moments. But for every family that walks into our offices, we know that there are others that are trying to do it alone. So that was why we wanted to really focus on those practices.
Yeah, I think that's great.
It is. I'm so grateful for it because in preparing for this episode, Traci, I had received your book about a month ago and I've been reading through it, and I had no idea at that time we were going to go through a natural disaster here in Kankakee County. And, last week we had a tornado and many people lost everything. And our church has been knee deep. And, I took some supplies over to some people today and just figuring out how we can respond. And when I was preparing for this past Sunday, and I might get choked up sharing this, but I wanted to really talk with the kids about what had happened, and a lot of them have been through some horrific things. And I was able to think about lighting the candle because I had been in your book and, I'm looking at the butterfly hug maybe for this coming Sunday, trying that together as a practice, because I think we need to keep talking about it because now it's something that they're, just faced with in their everyday right now. Many of them just returned to school, just all sorts of things. And so it was just a beautiful moment. And I was talking with my team on Sunday and we were discussing when to put it into our service. And they all said, Lindsey, we need to do it right away. This is what's on everyone's minds, And so I said, okay. So we did it. And it was just a beautiful moment. And it didn't have to be long. And I think that's an important thing for our listeners to hear too. Like the kids were able to really sit in that moment and then move on with our other activities planned. So I really appreciated just the timing of this conversation. I think is really divine.
Oh, I agree, Lindsey. And I do want to expound on what you were saying with that butterfly hug briefly. It's a really quick practice, but it is one that is rooted in a lot of research. Okay. And the research is around this bilateral stimulation, right? So whenever we use both sides of our brain, so what we do is cross our arms and then put our fingertips on our collarbone like a butterfly and then tap, tap, tap. And that practice is not a specifically Christian practice, but we make it Christian by explaining to the children that God hears us when we cry and that this is not just a practice, it's a prayer to God. So prayer is not only what we say. It doesn't have to be. When we don't have words, we can just be in a posture of prayer. And then the research will back up that motion will be very calming. So I'm so glad to hear that you're thinking of teaching that to the children in your care, because it's something that they can use to self-regulate,
Yes.
to calm down. But then we remind them, they might learn these skills in school, but it's outside of school and in church and in Christian homes where we talk about it being God's presence that we're calling upon in that moment.
Yeah, that's really good.
It is.
Yeah. Just to change topics just a little bit and go back to what you said earlier, Traci, you talked about how sacred your table time was with your family, and you talked about gratitude at being a major focus of what you do there. Can you give us some just real practical examples of some of the things that you do as a part of that?
Sure. So like I said, it's so hard sometimes to get everybody together when we're like running from sports and here and there and everywhere. But when we do our gratitude practice at home, what we do, and this is not in the book because it has evolved over the years, but what we have is a big butcher paper roll on the wall that you can pull down and then tear off. And I'll tell you what we do with that in a minute. But when we're going around the table, we talk about all the things that we're thankful to God for. And this is great too if you have a guest, maybe somebody that's not used to your family traditions or doesn't go to church, they can be incorporated too. What are you thankful for? This is how we talk to God in our house. And then we write down all the things that we're thankful for. And then we rip those papers off. And then on New Year's Eve, we go through and look at all of them together. So kind of looking back at all the ways that God was present in our lives. And with this practice and all of the practices in faithful families, I want to emphasize that there is an element of starting and stopping and beginning again. So in our family, we went through seasons where we were practicing this gratitude practice, every Saturday morning on Saturday morning breakfast. And then there were seasons where we abandoned it, not by choice, but it just sort of slipped away. But we were able to call ourselves back because that paper was on the wall, right? So that is one of the other important things to remember about spiritual practice with your family, is that sometimes we need to call ourselves back and begin again.
I love that. And I love the permission to say, we're going to begin again, that it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just about taking the time and being intentional and having those markers like the butcher paper on the wall, that says, hey, this is something that is important to us. And so for all the visual learners out there, which I think is a lot of us, that's important. Yeah. That's helpful.
A lot of tools you can use around the table. I don't know if either of you have seen, there are little prayer cubes that you can make or buy. I can send you one that I have, Lindsey, if you want to send out to people.
Okay.
Where you just, and that's kind of fun. You just shake it, and then whatever prayer it ends up on, you pray together. Sometimes it'll say, thank God for the food, or, do a silent prayer, whatever. And then that can add an element of fun. And then we have a little ring of prayer cards too that sometimes you can flip through. So just trying to take into account the ages around the table and what might stick for your family.
Yeah, that's really good. I know our episode, I think a few weeks ago, we talked about a gratitude.
Yeah.
That you can find, to have on the table, that's something that our guest mentioned. So yeah, there are so many great resources out there.
Yeah, there sure are. Traci, you talk a little bit about tracking your habits as a family when it comes to some of these practices. So talk to us a little bit about that. And then before we wrap up, I want you to focus a little bit on your little section in the back of the book on grandparenting and how this all plays out for grandparents. So if you'll address those two things.
Yeah. So, okay. So tracking, you at the very beginning, I can't remember if it was you, Lindsey, or you, Leon, but one of you mentioned Deuteronomy 6, right? These commandments I give to you to teach to your children, to talk about when you're, when you stand up and when you lie down, to write on the doorposts of your home. That Deuteronomy 6 passage is about this faith that we live being all around us. And so I think that faith at home is a practice, and we don't ask our kids, say we want them to be musicians, or we want them to be, learn how to play a sport really well, we don't just put a trumpet under their pillow and expect them to get it by osmosis. We expect them to practice. And I think sometimes it's helpful for families in a gentle way to track when we're doing our faith practices. So the way that I would encourage families to do it is just on a calendar, put a heart on there anytime that your family is able to pray around the table, or anytime you're able to do a bedtime blessing. So you can sort of see and practice and notice, because maybe you're practicing your faith at home more than you realize, or maybe you realize, oh, wow, I've gone several days without practicing faith at home. So I think it's about being gentle. It's not about being demanding or adding one more thing, just about establishing a rhythm in your home so that it becomes natural, so you don't have to think about it. So that's what I would say about the tracking. Grandparents, I think, I know, Leon, you said we wanted to talk about grandparents before we said goodbye, because so many listeners are grandparents. And gosh, what a gift grandparents are. I think the most important thing for you grandparents listening, and maybe some of you are lamenting that your grandchildren maybe don't go to church, or that there's some difference there in the way that the grandchildren are experiencing faith than your own children. The most important thing I think we want to do, though, is make sure that we're communicating well with the parents, with our children, right? So I think we don't want to set up a situation where grandparents are sort of taking over and jumping in. But if there is a way for parents to say gently to their children, hey, how do you feel about me starting a faith practice routine with the grandchildren? I would really like to do X, Y, or Z. I think lots of parents would be so relieved and grateful for that. The opportunity for grandparents to share their faith to their grandchildren in ways that maybe their parents don't. That's a huge part of my own faith story. My eldest son is named after my grandpa, who went to Wheaton College about the same time as Billy Graham. Like, his faith just, I don't know, it just is infused into my faith and into my life, and then passed on to my kids. So any of the practices in faithful families can be, taken on by grandparents. Just make sure that you're communicating well with your children about that.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And I think grandparents are, as you said, so infused with our hearts in many of our lives. I know mine are, and it's something that we don't want to take for granted, and we want to be intentional in our conversations with them as parents as well. So it's a good reminder for me as a parent to, not that my child's grandparents aren't a part of their life, but to continue being in conversation about those things together, because it's easy to get caught up in just the everyday, needs that are going on, or accomplishments like this at school or this for the extracurriculars, but to have time to actually talk to grandparents about faith as well is so important as a parent. So,
yeah, such a gift.
Mm-hmm. It is. Well, as we wrap up today, Traci, I'm just wondering one last thing. Where have you personally found sacred in the ordinary in your everyday life? It could be something just recently, or it could be something from the past, but just wondering if you would share with our listeners one way you've experienced the sacred in the ordinary.
Yeah, so many, but I'm going to say a place where I spend a ton of time right now, and that's the car.
Yep.
My husband and I are just joking about the fact that we are the mom and dad taxi service right now with our children wherever they go. And just this week, speaking of gratitude, so my son was asking me for something. I can't remember what it was. And he said, can I have, I don't know, Blizzard, Chipotle, whatever it was. And I made a little joke to him, and I said, sure, the price of that is going to be gratitude. And I was being a little snarky. What I meant was gratitude for all this driving that I'm doing. But my son is so used to gratitude being connected to God at this point. He said, "Oh, sure, Mom, I'd love to tell you some things I'm grateful for." And he said, "I'm so thankful to God for," and listed a bunch
Wow.
of reasons that he was grateful to God. And I thought, oh, wow, somehow it did seep in that gratitude is something that is related to God's mercy. So that was a real grace to me. And it actually changed my attitude about being so crabby about all this driving that I'm doing.
Wow.
It's a great example.
Yeah,
Thank you for
great.
sharing.
Yeah. Well, Traci, we want to thank you for being with us. But before we wrap up officially today, I'd like for you to share with our listeners resources that you have, whether that be books or curriculum that you think would be helpful to them on this journey.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Traci Smith, Traci with an I, so tracysmith.com. And that's where you can find all of my books. You can also find them anywhere books are sold. And they're the Faithful Families series. So there is an Easter one, a Christmas one, the OG, and then 2 prayer books. So I would love for you to check those out. And the promise that I hope that your listeners will make to themselves if they do buy any books is to remember that it's not an assignment to do all the things. It's to pick one thing that you think your family might really enjoy. So that's where I would send them.
Excellent. Yeah. And listeners, I would encourage you to pick up Traci's Faithful Families book. It's got I think about 50 or so different ways to practice the things that we've been talking about today. And I have found them really helpful. And as a grandparent, I'm going to implement some of these with my grandkids. So I am blessed because I have a family who is very supportive of that kind of thing. So it'll be an easy opportunity for me to take advantage of.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, Traci, we have a weekly reminder as we log off each week. Again, thank you for being with us, and I'll let you close us with our reminder.
I love your weekly reminder. Friends, as you go from this place, remember, when building faith, we are better together.